Yeah, that's just. No. It's just too much technology here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavati Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Nandanaya Cha Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So welcome everyone, good evening. We are looking today at discussing something Srimad Bhagavatam related to the Lord's creation of this world. So it's quite a interesting topic. Sometimes it always seemed that it was always in my mind to kind of do of this topic, which of course I have not yet completed, but as I was reading recently second canto, because this is explained actually in two places in the Bhagavatam. It is explained in the second canto chapter 5 and 6, and then later it is explained in the which
Hare Krishna.
no I have to actually adjust the bars here. 1 second.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Yeah, it's working. So actually all this technology is a little new technology, so we are still getting used to it. So the second canto, chapter 5 and chapter 6 discuss this particular the Lord's creation. And also later in the third canto, so in the second canto, this comes between the discussion of Brahma and Narada, and then later in the third canto, this comes between two times actually. In chapter 6 it comes Maitreya and Vidura are discussing, and then later it comes in the instruction chapter 26 where there is an instruction of Kapila and Devahuti. I think we are saying Bhagavatam, but we are having too much technology. So maybe we should just be like Shukadeva Goswami and just peacefully sit somewhere and talk. Technology ke saath it becomes extremely difficult to say anything. Anyway, so let us see. Let us attempt to discuss something. Yeah? Now I don't know why this is coming like this. 1 second. That's another challenge. This was supposed to be for me, so that I understand what next, but no, this is Mac Air, so this Mac is another big demon. Yeah, so it looks okay now. Let's see. Okay, so as I told you, it comes in 2-3 places in the Bhagavatam, mainly in the second and third canto. And many times as devotees, when we try to read these particular sections of the Bhagavatam, we find it a little difficult. It has so many technical details as to how the creation happens. And it's not very clear as to why this entire thing has been explained. Though all our acharyas have always stated that this is the pastime of Lord in the material world. The pastimes. So that's how it is stated. The Lord's creation of this world is also a Leela only of the Lord. Srishti Leela. And in this Srishti Leela also there are several interesting things to learn. And though it is very difficult sometimes, many times these cantos act as some barrier. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, 5th canto is a barrier to check whether a person has faith. So those who have faith, they will progress beyond that. others are stuck over there, so they don't go ahead. So in this way, generally, the creation of the world, which is at least in the second and third canto, this comes. Right? As I told earlier in chapter 5 and 6 of second canto, and chapter 6 and 26 of the third canto. Between Brahma, Narada, Vidura Maitreya, and then later Kapila Devahuti. So it comes again and again actually. So it does turn out that, and also when we read it, especially if we feel that we have to explain this to some scientist or someone, then again we are not clear as to how this makes any scientific sense. As in when we speak about these kind of things which are there in the Bhagavatam second and third canto, it is not very clear how we can use this as a model to explain to common people in the world about creation. Correct? So in this way there are so many challenges. So that's why I always thought that perhaps we have to kind of study this part very nicely, because certainly there would be many things in it. So I had just actually started a couple of days back, and this PPT is a very shabbily made PPT, because I did this in about 15 minutes, because today I had 3 lectures in office, so somehow I made something. So let us see how it goes. So what I am going to do today is we'll have it in 2 parts. So the first part, I wish to present some tables which very nicely show the Bhagavata model of creation. So these tables I have taken as it is from the these Chowpatty, they are Bhagavatam study guides, so they are very useful. So I'll start with some tables, and then I have noted down some lessons basically. That's from different places in the purport and so many other places. So then we will go to the second part. So like this we will have 2 parts of this discussion. So the first part will be a little technical. So please bear with me for that, because we have to go through to understand actually what the Bhagavatam says, and then once we discuss that, then we can go on and see what are the various lessons that so many others have stated about why this model is explained like this place. So that is the agenda for the talk, right? So let's get started. Okay, so this is how it all looks like. We'll explain this diagram briefly. So this description is there in this way both in the second canto and third canto. It is actually repeated 2-3 times. So the whole understanding is that there is Mahavishnu, who is considered as the the cause, who is residing in the causal ocean, and he only is the cause of the ingredients. That is and also the cause of the creation. So basically there are 2 things. So just like an example is given about Mahavishnu, Prabhupada gives the brilliant example of the spider. Like the spider is the cause of the web, and it is not only the cause of the web, but also the spider, the ingredient web also comes from the spider only. So that means the spider from its own mouth produces the web, the ingredient. When you say something has to be, let us say the building has to be constructed, 2 things are there. First we have to get the ingredients, and next thing is actually you have to make the building. So for example, in this material world, if you see very carefully, none of us manufacture ingredients. We only assemble things together and create something, right? I mean, like Prabhupada, the discussion is there with the gentleman. When he asked him that, what is your business? He said, I'm making glass. So where is glass coming? Silica, that is coming from sand. So you are a thief, Prabhupada said, because you are taking something from God's nature and you are making and selling. He said, yes, Swamiji, but I also give donation. Prabhupada said, okay, you are a small thief. So the idea is that in this world, none of us actually manufacture ingredients. We only take ingredients and assemble it together and then we sell. But Mahavishnu is described as that personality, like the spider. So that's very amazing actually. The spider creates the web from its own mouth. So the ingredient is the spiders only. The spider doesn't get like a crow or some bird getting the ingredient from different places. It creates the ingredient from its own mouth, and then it assembles also web. And not only it assembles the web, and the web completely. So that means it can absorb it in its own system. It can do that also. So basically that's why the spider is compared to the Mahavishnu is compared to him, because he can create the ingredients, set it up, and when he is finished with it, he can do everything back in himself. So basically the whole thing is over now, nothing is there. So it's an amazing thing also. As I was hearing this example, I also thought it's very wonderful that the Lord has also created many such examples also in the world, through which we can see how he has done it. There is one entity called spider, because nobody else, I think, no other example is as close to it as the spider, which does the whole thing by himself. So that's why that example is there very often in the Bhagavata, as a spider. And the spider has complete control on the web, and the spider is not bound by the web. So for example, all the other insects get caught up in the web, but the spider is not caught in its web. So the Lord is not caught in the Maya also. So it's a very apt example, the example of spider. So that's how we can look at Mahavishnu. Okay, so now having said that, we'll just go ahead briefly and see. So this material nature, now okay, all these things now we will define. Currently I'm just first we will have a bird's eye view of the Bhagavad model, and then as we go into the lessons, we will end up elaborating on many of these things. So immediately I will not elaborate on every point. So we'll initially just go through it, but then later when we go to the lessons, automatically this part will again be revised. Okay, so the idea is that there are these three things: Kala, there is Karma, and there is the Swabhava of the various living entities. And so this is like the beginning, there is time. So we will see the importance of time also later. This will all come. So the idea is that initially there is something called Pradhan, okay, which is called as material nature. And this Pradhan is said to be undifferentiated, so it is like in this Pradhan, there is no time and modes are inactive. So it has not yet been set into motion. So Pradhan can be viewed as the sum total of material elements, but it's not yet actually set into motion. Yeah, so it's dormant. Then there is this entity called Mahatattva. We'll again look at Mahatattva in greater detail later, but currently we are just defining. So from Pradhan there comes Mahatattva. So Mahatattva is basically that entity where time enters into. So that means time enters, and because, so when time enters, things actually start. That's what material world is, where there is time. And time enters, the modes enter, and also the false ego enters. The conditioned consciousness of the false ego enters. Now that, the importance of that false ego also we are going to see later. So currently I am just defining the terms, and later we will go into each of it in detail. Okay, so that is called as this Mahatattva. So from Pradhan there is Mahatattva. And then from Mahatattva, if you see, the first entity that comes is Ahankar, false ego. So that is considered the key thing that comes out, first creation of Mahatattva. And there is a very important significance of this also. Why it is false ego that comes and what is the implication of that. We will again visit this. So currently we are just going over it wholly. So then the Bhagavatam says that Ahankar or false ego which is there, in goodness what it produces, in passion what it produces, and in ignorance what it produces. So in fact the Bhagavatam, it says that first Ahankar mixes with the mode of goodness, and then there is Jnana Shakti that is created. We will look at this also in detail. So there are three Shaktis: Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, and Dravya Shakti. So Jnana Shakti is the doer or the Karta, and Kriya Shakti is the cause or the Karana, and Dravya Shakti is the effect or Karya. About all this also we will see in detail later. So from Jnana Shakti comes Adhideva, which is basically the mind and the Devatas. From the Kriya Shakti comes the Adhyatma, which is the Prana, the life air, the 10 senses and the intelligence. So the 10 senses also we will see soon. And from the Adi Bhuta comes the 5 Tanmatras and 5 elements. So basically this is how the Bhagavatam explains briefly about the top-down system of how all the elements come together. Okay, now we'll define some more entities, because so till now I think we have just basically defined what is Pradhan, Mahatattva, and these three things that come: Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti. So that or the Jnana Shakti, there is the mind and the 10 sense devatas. So which are the 10 senses? It's very simple: the 5 Jnanendriyas and the 5 Karmendriyas. And the 5 Karmendriyas, as you see here: the eyes, ears, skin, nose, tongue, voice. And each of this is associated with a devata as well. Ear is the Dik Devata, eye is the sun, skin is Vayu, nose is Ashwini Kumar, tongue is Varuna, hands is Indra, feet is Upendra, voice is Agni, anus is Mitra, and genitals is Prajapati. So the devatas, the sense devatas are considered these 10, and the 10 senses we have already seen: intelligence, Okay, about this we will just briefly say something before we go ahead because this is important. So as you see here, the way it is explained is that as false ego gets added more and more, things become more and more gross. Okay, so the thing is, initially when the false ego component is less, it is said that the effects of goodness are there, where the sense devatas come up. But then when there is more false ego added, then there are the senses that come and the intelligence. So the intelligence is considered in passion because that is actually scheming to material world in various ways. Even more added, the 5 gross elements that come. So the 5 elements, if you see, they are considered dravya and they are considered the most gross. So I think so this is very significant that the dravya or ingredients are considered the most grossest of all, and that is said to be a product of guna primarily. Whereas the senses, if you see, the senses are considered because actually I think there's a lot of problem with this. Hare Krishna. Huh? Maybe it is. I'll just change the battery, then I'll understand. Just 1 second. What is happening? I am somehow getting a little distracted because of the way it sounds. Oh, spelling mistake. Hare Krishna. Yeah, maybe this will be better. I don't know. New battery. Yeah, it's better, right? It looks at least good at this point. Okay. So, yeah. So now we'll go into some technical things. If you see, the whole idea is matter or gross things are considered tamoguna, right? Senses are considered rajoguna. They are coming out from passion. Because senses are considered rajoguna because senses are always trying to be active and doing something. And the devatas who actually control the senses and the mind are considered a product of sattva because it is said that because it is actually the devatas, the sense devata, because of which a sense is being maintained. See, the whole idea is that in passion you start an activity, but who maintains the activity? Anything is maintained only in sattva. And all our senses are actually working because of the demigod who is actually, in charge of that sense of everybody in the universe. So there are demigods who are controlling all these senses. And that demigod is the actual maintenance factor. Right? So that is why this is called karta. That means he is actually the doer, the devata. Okay, the devata is actually the doer. Okay, so in fact, in the Bhagavatam, in the 10th canto, in Brahmaji's prayer to Lord Krishna, there is a very beautiful prayer that comes where Brahmaji is praying to Krishna that we are all so fortunate as demigods, because he says that you have allowed your eternal associates to come to this world in the form of the gopis and gopas and Vrindavan. And all the demigods are able to relish your association through the respective sense of the demigods. Because each of us as devatas access a particular sense of every living entity. So the sun accesses the eyes. This whole list which we saw. The sun accesses the eyes. The Vayu accesses the skin. So each demigod, there are basically totally these 10 plus, there is also Rudra and some others also. We'll come to that entire list. So there are about 13 prominent demigods who control all that means there are 10 senses. Besides the 10 senses, there is also Ahankar, Rudra and, some others as well. The mind and so on. So, right, so that is not coming actually in the 10. So there is mind is controlled by the moon, intelligence is controlled by Brahmaji, and false ego is controlled by Rudra, Shiva. So Brahmaji says that all 11 of us are 11 demigods are enjoying your pastimes because we are all accessing the nectar through the senses of the gopis and everyone. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is asking the question, why 11? Because there are 13, right? There are these 10 plus there is the mind, intelligence and false ego. So basically, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the anus and genitals are not engaged in the service of the Lord, so that's why these two are discounted. And that's why it's 11, he says. Okay, so the basic point is that it is actually the demigods who control that particular sense, who actually maintain that sense, and who is actually considered the doer. So that's why that is considered the doer. That means in the mode of goodness only something actually happens, or in the sense of being maintained. Whereas passion is the cause. So that's why it is called as karana. That means anything happens because of passion. So only with passion some project starts off, like a project kickoff, they say in our software IT terminology. So there is a kickoff of a project. So it starts because of passion. And the effect in the material world is always considered something very gross. And that is considered tamoguna. So that means we start some activity, the big fanfare and with a lot of excitement. But at the end, it is just some very gross thing that happens. Just like, for example, sex life. There is so much of promise of it that it is extremely exciting, this, that. But at the end of the day, whatever happens after all that indulgence is just some, matter that is discharged at the end of it. And that is actually considered in tamas. So that's why the effect is basically dravya. That means of all your desires which you start off and which are maintained by the grace of demigods, the outcome of that is something very gross. And that gross is nothing but tamas. So that's why that's considered as karya, effect, or dravya shakti, which is basically the 5 tanmatras. Tanmatras means what? The object of the sense. That means your eyes are looking for form. So, that form is considered basically dravya, or kind of, it's considered very, very gross matter. And ultimately, each tanmatra becomes even more grosser in the sense of elements. We will see that connection also very soon. Everything is explained in the Bhagavatam. We'll come to that connection. And more importantly, we will also try to see and understand as to why the Bhagavatam presents it like this. So, those reasons are extremely exciting to see as to why Kapaladev presents, the universe in this particular fashion. So, we'll come to that. Okay, so at this point, we have only defined Pradhan, Mahat Tattva. Okay, so Pradhan and Mahat Tattva difference was, one is kind of unmanifest and this is like set into motion with the help of time factor. And then we saw that Ahankar plays a role, and this role also we have to define yet. We will come to that very soon. And then we saw that there is goodness, passion, ignorance, and we saw the 3 things. I think that one thing we have explained at least in some detail, that why the demigods, the sense demigods, they are called as sense devatas. The sense demigods and the mind are considered product of goodness because they are actually maintaining. Intelligence and the 10 senses and prana are considered passion because that is actually the force behind starting some project. Like prana is also important. Just like actually each of these things are elaborated in great detail. Like prana means we have these 10 prana, and it is because of the prana shakti that one does. So the prana is also translated in English as vital energy. And it is that vital energy which kind of motivates a person to do some project or do something. So that's all considered products of passion. The prana, the 10 senses, and the intelligence. The intelligence is considered passion because it's always scheming as to how to get better deal in this world. How to enjoy better. And as I told you, the most gross is the external things. So they are considered ignorant. So this much we have actually covered at this point. Let's go ahead. Yeah, then we basically saw a list. Of course, we will come to this list again later. And there is this other list that the Bhagavatam talks of. That means these 5 tanmatras and 5 elements, how they are created. So the Bhagavatam discusses this. How the 5 tanmatra means the object of sense. 5 elements means the bhumi, rapa, analo, vayu, kham. So the Bhagavatam discusses this beautiful chart that from sound there is ether, then there is touch, then there is air, form, fire, taste, water, smell, and earth. So the idea is that this is basically the point here is that everything succeeding has all the qualities preceding it. So for example, ether has sound. So sound is the first tanmatra that is produced. So if you see, these are all tanmatras and these are all the gross elements. So sound is considered the first tanmatra, and that is also very significant. Prabhupada writes about it. We will come to that very soon. So from the tanmatra comes the element, and then from the element comes again the next tanmatra. So again that connection is also there. So ultimately So for example, water has all these properties, but the most important property of water is taste. So we say rasoham apsu kaunteya. But water has form, touch and sound also. So similarly, so like that. So it's successively created. So we'll again come back to this a little later. Okay, now we will look at this very interesting chart that the Bhagavatam talks of. This is extremely interesting. Here, the way the Bhagavatam defines things is the Bhagavatam says that every sense organ which is there has two parts to it. And these two parts are also very significant. One is called gross and one is called subtle. That means every sense that we have, this is explained both in the second canto and in the third canto. It's almost repeated 2-3 times, this concept. That every sense has a gross component and a subtle component. The gross component, like talu, if you say, that is the gross tongue. But jihua is the subtle tongue that desires to taste. So that's how the distinction the Bhagavatam makes. So the Bhagavatam says that there is a, so when you say when my tongue is watering, by looking at the wonderful prasad that Priti Mataji has made today, then there is this gross tongue which is there, right? But the gross tongue is just the tongue, but there is a subtle sense organ, and the subtle sense organ. So that's why, for example, we've seen Bhagavad Gita, that famous verse, Shrotram chakshus parshanam cha rasanam ghranam evacha adhisthaya manaschaya vishayanupasevate. If you look at that verse, all the 5 things that Krishna speaks, Shrotram, Chakshuhu, Sparshanam, Rasanam, Granam. So actually all these things are referring to the subtle sense organs and not the gross sense organ. So Chakshu, so Akshini is the eye. So that means there is the physical eye and there is the subtle eye that desires to see something. So there is this subtle eye. So the whole concept here is, the Bhagavad concept is that we have gross senses and we have subtle senses also. And it is a subtle sense that actually desires everything. The gross sense is just an external instrument. Okay, and of course, many of our devotee researchers have done amazing research as well. So one devotee, I think it is Devanand Maharaj or someone, he explains that when even blind people, when they undergo near-death experience, like we talk about NDE, right? Even when a blind man or a woman undergoes near-death experience, they can see it seems. That means somebody is congenitally blind. That means he has never seen in life actually. But then when he undergoes near-death experience, he sees. So the question is, who is seeing? Because this guy has never seen only anything. It's like Dhritarashtra seeing the universal form of the Lord. He has never seen anything. So the question is, who is seeing? He is only seeing because now he is out of the body, through his subtle senses he is seeing. Okay. So for example, there is the hand, which is the physical hand, and there is a subtle hand that wishes to grasp. So Sadaput Prabhu, he writes that they have done experiments and they have seen, it seems, that if somebody loses the hand in an accident, like for example, let us say someone's hand got cut in an accident. The fellow who loses the hand in his accident, he feels a missing hand. Are you getting it? He feels a missing hand. This phenomenon in science is called as phantom limbs. So phantom limbs means I feel that I have a hand and that hand itches as well, but actually there is no hand because the physical hand is cut. So this phenomena is not understood as to why it happens. So, in science they have come up with solutions also for this. Solution that means if somebody loses his hand and he feels a missing hand, what these people do is they cut the sensation in the brain to that hand and try to do something extremely gross to stop that sensation. But the Bhagavad model is what it is. The model is that subtle body extends throughout our gross body, and there is a gross sense organ and there is a subtle sense organ. So it is actually the subtle sense organ of grasping. So just like there is a gross hand, there is a subtle hand as well. And that subtle hand wishes to grasp. The subtle hand wishes to box or beat up somebody. But the gross hand is what you see here. So it's like that. So that's how the Bhagavatam discusses it. Okay. So the point is, every sense in the, so this comes at least 3 places in the Bhagavatam. In the second canto it comes, in the third canto it comes, in the fourth canto when you read the Puranjan story also, this whole concept of subtle sense comes. Because there you see that, he traveled using this sense to this city, saw something and came back. Some of you may recall reading Puranjan section in the 4th canto. Right? So there also this whole concept is there, that the subtle senses. Okay, so the Bhagavatam talks about, so there's a gross, and there is a significance of it, we'll come to that a little bit. There's more to explain on the subtle sense. So for example, there is Upastha and there is Shishna. So Shishna is the gross genital, Upastha is the subtle genital which wishes to, have the sex life, etc. So right, so this is it. So like that. So each of these senses is gross sense organ. So for example, now we say Upadeshamrita. How does Upadeshamrita begin? What is the first verse? Jihva vegam, vacho vegam, Jihva vegam, udara upastha vegam. You understood it. So the scripture always speaks about the subtle sense only. Like whether it is Bhagavad Gita or Upadeshamrita, they are not talking about the gross sense. They are talking about the subtle sense. I mean the desire to see. That is the eye which you have to manage. Chakshuhu. Okay. These things have to be actually controlled and channelized. So that's how the Bhagavatam sees it. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll come back to this theme soon. So there is also the sense devata, as I had told earlier. This is again the same thing, which we'll come to later. And there is a tanmatra. That means, if you see, there is an eye which has a subtle sense, chakshu, which desires to see. There is a gross sense called akshini, which actually sees. Right? So that's why, I mean, some blind man may do eye transplant and get somebody else's akshini, but then it is his chakshu only which is working. You know, his desires to see, which is being manifest through another guy's akshini. Right? So that is a gross thing. And there is a sense devata, there is a sun god who is actually the adipati of this akshini and chakshu. He is the boss of it. Right? So he is actually seeing through everybody's eyes. He is the witness. He is the actual doer. We are only the desirer, and I decide that I want to see. But then who is actually seeing the doer? The doer, the maintainer is the sun god only. So that's why he knows. So again, this is the Bhagavatam says, so many times I used to wonder, how is this correction made? So the Bhagavatam says that when the sense is created by the Lord, that time only this Devata is also created. That means the sense and the Devata are all created together. It's all connected right at the time of creation. So now we'll go to that point. So this part I have not made a slide of it. But the Bhagavatam gives this outline. The Bhagavatam says that when this Virat Purush, okay, so there is this Virat Purush who has all his senses. So that means after all the ingredients are created, you know, so in the creation, just to go back a little bit, when all this stuff is created, then there is a Virat Purusha. And he's the only person who is there. Now what basically he does is, he creates these material senses. So what the Virat Purusha does is, it is said that the Virat Purusha desires. So for example, the Virat Purusha desires to eat, right? That means the Lord, he desires to eat. So when he desires to eat, and now he desires to eat in a material form, you understood? Generally the Lord eats in the spiritual world also, but that eating is different. That is using transcendental senses. But now he wants to create all these senses and that connection mechanism. So when he desires to eat, the first thing that comes is talu, the gross sense organ of tongue. So that's the first thing that comes. And then after talu comes, the next thing is jihwa. That means the taste sensations. You know, so talu is just the external sense called tongue, and jihwa is the taste sensation. I want to taste, you know, rabudi, rasmalai, that stuff. You know, that kind of a thing. Subtle sense organ. And then he creates the sense devata. That means Varuna. Varuna Dev. So, so these 5 things, it is said he creates in a line. So the Lord desires to eat. So first there is jihwa, the subtle sense, then there is the gross sense, then there is a devata also that created. So devata, from here I understand that particular post of the devata or that adipati who actually is going to monitor this sense of everybody in the universe. And then the taste is created. So because now that he wants to, so now that he has a sense and he has a desire to eat and he has a devata also, now the next question is what to eat. Or what to enjoy. Sorry, not what to eat, what to enjoy. So what to enjoy? Taste. So then the tanmatra is created. And then finally the most grossest thing is the water, which is actually the taste thing. So this is the sequence of the Bhagavatam describes for each of the senses. This is the sequence in which these things are actually made up. No. Sorry, Talu is first and Jihva is next. So sorry, yeah. So here it is the other way. You're right. First the gross sense organ, then the subtle sense organ, then the subtle devata, then the tanmatra, and then finally the grossest element of all. Okay, so there is a lot of significance of these things also. We'll come to that quickly. Maybe from this chart I can explain that better. So this chart we can explain that better because the Bhagavatam also says, so as we said earlier, one second, let me just see if I forgot anything in the previous one. Yeah, okay. So we may come to that again. So that's what it says, stotra. Shrotram chakshusparshanam charasanam granam evacha.
Stotra means one who desires to hear.
Yeah, desires to hear.
That means these people are desiring to hear. That's the meaning of that.
Yeah, Shrotragan. Correct. We don't say इतने सारे कर्ण बैठे हैं यहाँ पर. Karna as in ears. इतने सारे श्रोत्रागण बैठे हैं यहाँ. Correct. In Hindi we say. What it means is you're desiring to hear. Yeah, very good. Yeah, correct. Dik Devata is the name of a Devata who control directions. That's a post. It's a post which is occupied by different Devatas at different times. The Dik Devatas. The demigods of directions. The 10 directions. Upendra. Yeah, Upendra is the brother of Indra. There is this Vaman. Or perhaps that's actually, you know what? These are all posts. Upendra at one point of time was Vaman. It is not permanently Vaman. So Vaman is called Upendra, but every Upendra need not be that. So you have to understand that. See, in our system, the demigods are all post only. They are not like current Surya is Vivaswan. But that again changes, right? Some other time, somebody else is Surya. It's just a post, a prime minister, chief minister, like that. So these are posts. Indra, current Indra is Purandar. But that Indra can change. Tomorrow there can be another fellow sitting on Indra's post. So anyway, so now this is another interesting thing that the Bhagavatam talks of. So it's just a continuation of that. The gross sense organ, subtle sense organ, and the sense devata. Now here everything has come, if you notice. Not only the senses, but so many other things have come as well. Hridayam, abdomen, veins, legs, everything. So there is a gross sense of veins. There is a subtle thing which actually is blood is treated as a subtle sense organ here. Like, right? You can see that. And there is a sense devata also. Now one thing very interesting, Prabhupada explains this several times in his purports, that this is not just some, it's not made just for some entertainment. It has an application as well. Prabhupada gives the application of this chart by saying that the human body is connected to these sense devatas. So Prabhupada quotes Ayurveda repeatedly and says, if anybody has any problem in any of the senses, then that sense devata actually sorts it out. In a gross sense and in a subtle sense. So in a gross sense, for example, Prabhupada says, if somebody is having problem of hunger and thirst, that means he is not having enough hunger and thirst. Prabhupada quotes Ayurveda and says that he should take bath in the ocean. Because the Samudra Devata is actually the Adipati of the Udaram. And the feeling of hunger and thirst is a subtle sense organ connected to it. You understood? So it is not just in terms of the Devata Upasana. So there is one thing called Devata Upasana. That means you worship that Devata for that issue. But even these things are also in terms of the universal body. So Prabhupada also gives another example saying that veins. That Prabhupada says that as per Ayurveda, if there is a problem with the veins of somebody, he should take bath in the river. Because the Nadhya Devata, they are in charge of the veins. And if you have problem in your veins and blood, if you take bath in river, that is solved. Correct? Now, and this mind, of course, we know, Chandra only. Chandra is in charge of the mind. I was reading actually, teaching my children some Western book on astronomy. So, this is written by a Westerner actually. But this guy explains in great detail how all over the world, he doesn't talk only about India, he talks about Europe. He says that in European understanding, the mind is connected to the moon. He explains that. He explains why they are called as lunatics, how during, lunatic. Lunatic means that only, right? Somebody who's crazy, somebody with a mental problem. So he says that how whenever those who are having mental problem, when the moon is, right, not there or there, I forgot. Purnima or Amavasya? One of it or both, I don't remember. Purnima only, you remember that? Okay. So when the moon is in full form, then they are even more strongly affected by that thing. So he quotes, he's saying all this from Western perspective. At that time, as I was reading, I was thinking, oh my God, our Shastra talks so much about it. That, Chandrama Manaso Jataha. That's what. Yeah, this was another. No, not Palava. Which inspiration that we read about it? Correct. He says that all types of musicians and artists who generally work, because on the mental platform, that means, the mind only gives all these ideas. It seems these ideas come to the maximum during the full moon. Yeah. And mad people who are affected, they also go even more crazy during full moon. So he explains this from a Western perspective actually. He doesn't touch only our Indian concept, but Indian concept is so strongly there. Purusha Suktam, Purusha Suktam is one very famous line. Chandrama Manaso Jataha. It's from the Chandra that the Manasa has come. So this is not just in terms of, so like even I was thinking speech and fire. If you see, one way to improve speech is by chanting Vedic mantras, which is actually connected to fire. So if somebody actually pronounces Sanskrit Vedic mantras, and Sanskrit Vedic mantras are all relation to fire and that particular worship, then that speech, that Vani actually which is there, it is said to become very Shuddha. The Vani Shuddhi basically comes by reciting Sanskrit, prayers in Sanskrit language. So again so if you see each of these things, of course I couldn't find all other connections, but even this is there, like Twak hair, Twak Roma, mustache, beard, skin problem is actually solved by herbs. You understood? So that connection is also, I'm talking only about those connections which are very gross, right? That means herbs or aushadha, it is basically for the, skin and various itching and, those kind of things. Correct? So if you see in many ways, several of these items, of course, we may not very immediately see how Buddhi is connected to Brahma or how Ahankar is connected to Shiva. But I thought that many of these items in this list, one can even see in a very gross perspective in connection with the worldly items, because Prabhupada says all that in the purport. So the reason for that, as for the Bhagavatam, because in the creation itself, the Lord created these three things together. The post of that Devata, the subtle sense and the gross sense, the desire to eat, and the form, the Tanmatra, and actual element also, the water, fire. That means here everything is not covered. Here only three things are there. There are two more things.
Heart has many subtle
Yeah, because heart, when you say heart, this is subtle body. Heart is subtle body. Like in movie and all, when they say they love heart and all, the heart is not the gross heart. That's a very, right, the one that is pumping blood and moving like this, that's not in love. So when they draw a heart, the heart actually, Hridayam, though it is called like, so this is the gross sense, but then actual subtle senses are these. So that's how the connection is. So when you say heart, actually even other people refer to the mind only, right? Like when they say I'm in love and they use the heart symbol, they are not literally referring to the gross heart. They are referring to the subtle items only. And the subtle items are manifest as four: the mind, the intelligence, the ahankar, and the chitta, consciousness. So each of it has a devata. And this chitta also is very significant. We'll come to it. There is a very important lesson to learn from Vasudeva and chitta. We'll come to that a little later. So basically there are these five things: the gross sense organ, which gives the subtle sense organ, which gives the subtle devata, which gives the tanmatra. Correct? The fourth column is what? Tanmatra. What is tanmatra? Tanmatra is the object of the sense. Correct? Like for the mouth, it is sound. For the nostrils, it is that smell. Like that. For each thing, there is a tanmatra, and at the other end of tanmatra is the actual gross item. Okay? Actual gross item. So as it comes to that, it becomes the most grossest of all. So that's how it is. Right?
When you said that abdomen, feelings of hunger and thirst,
Yeah.
if it have problem of taking
So one second. You have to speak in this. Yeah. Okay, unfortunately I have to buy a new battery. Anyway, tell me. Yeah.
when it is lower or higher, let us suppose I have the habit of eating more.
The bath in ocean will help me
Reduce it, huh?
reduce it.
Actually, Prabhupada says when it is less, it will increase. I think that I don't know whether if I'm eating a lot, it reduces. Good question, actually. You have to note it down. So please note, I already told you that I made the whole PPT in 15-20 minutes. So I have done only 50% preparation. So I think these questions I will also remember. We'll try to find out the answer for this. But
lot of hungry.
when you swim, you feel hungry. Now, of course, that is also from an external. Swimming, you feel hungry. That is because of the exercise. No, but here it is very clear. It is not just swimming anywhere. Ocean swimming gives hunger and thirst, and river swimming rectifies blood and veins problem. So it's two different things. So that is a very gross thing. Whether you swim in the swimming pool where people urinate, or whether you take bath in the ocean, you will feel the same thing. Yeah, correct?
Mind is here, not here.
Mind is?
Here.
Yeah, the mind is here only. As in, see, the subtle sense, this is considered the main source of it as such. Actually, this is the brain. Actually, strictly speaking, the subtle body is there everywhere. But the general understanding is that the mind, intelligence, buddhi, ahankar is primarily situated. Yeah, there is no heart. Like one feels emotions here only, right? Like one feels bad. Bahut bura laga, Prabhuji. So why they say here only, No, actually it's a fact. So there is a connection. No, this is because of headache. That is a different thing. But you feel the pain in the chest. You feel it here. So the point is, when the gross sense, subtle sense is affected, the gross sense is also affected. Actually, I was making some research. In the modern world, they don't understand only what is subtle body. Their only understanding of subtle body, you know what is their understanding of subtle body? It is a very gross understanding. Hormonal change. That is subtle body. That means when you are depressed, Shastra says depression is happening in the subtle sense organ. But that subtle sense organ, when there is depression, there is some hormonal change in your body. And modern medicine understands hormonal change as depression. So in fact, modern science has also understood that when you are happy mentally, one boy was arguing with me in college. He was saying that when we are happy, if you want to become happy, there are pills also, you know, nowadays. Correct, Namadiji? There are pills that make you happy. So one fellow was, what is this pill that makes you happy? I tried to understand. Kya hai ki when you are happy, normally, when you are normally happy, there are some hormonal changes in your body. So this pill makes that hormonal change, it's a very gross thing, to equal to the same hormonal change when you were happy. So that, you feel the reverse effect of feeling happy. So one boy was talking to me on this. So I told him, okay, so I'll ask you one thing. Suppose let us say you go home sometime and you see that, some close family member of yours is dead. Okay, and I give you that pill, which changes the hormonal balance and makes you happy. Are you going to feel happy? He thought for a minute. He said that, well, I'm not sure about it. Whether I'll feel happy at that time. Gaya, upar gaya. So one thing is very clear that the modern perspective, they look at it in a very gross way. Everything is gross. There's nothing subtle only. Everything stops here. That's it. There's nothing like that. So everything is viewed only from a gross perspective. And of course they give medicine also. So person feels very confident. But here the model goes beyond. Yeah. Okay. So now this is just a model. So there are several lessons also that we wanted to talk. So let's go one by one. Okay. The first one we will talk about Mahat Tattva. So the Mahat Tattva, as I said earlier, it is the Pradhan, time plus ego. So this I have actually taken from Bhaktividya Purna Maharaj. So he explains this very nicely by saying that Mahat Tattva is of two types. And he explains this very nicely. He said there is one Mahat Tattva which is without the contaminated consciousness. That means without false ego. Okay, I'll just remove this. He said there is one Mahat Tattva without contaminated consciousness, which is only the sum total of matter. And when the contaminated consciousness is added, so he says that is why in the scripture we say reflection of the spiritual world and perverted reflection of the spiritual world. He says there are two different things. He says reflection of the spiritual world is found in the Karana Samudra, the causal ocean. So he says if you go to Mahavishnu's platform and you see the Karana Samudra in which Mahavishnu is lying down, that Karana Samudra basically is the place where the Mahat Tattva is situated. And there you see the reflection of the spiritual worlds. So the Vaikuntha planets reflect on the Karana Samudra, and that reflection is actually these worlds. So it's like a 3D reflection. Okay, we only understand 2D reflections, right? Right, I mean we have a shadow, it's a 2D reflection. This is 3D. Actually nowadays there is 3D, 3D printing, which is going to be very popular, the next thing in computer development. So just like nowadays we have a printout, right? Where we take printout. Now they're saying the next step in technology is you want a toy. So you kind of make that 3D model and you say print and the toy only will come out. The 3D modeling. Correct, na? So this is the next big thing in computer science. Right? अच्छा आपके पास already है क्या? क्या आता है उसमें? Okay, so Prahlad Prabhu will illuminate us on this knowledge.
You design a part on the PC and you give the sort of print to that computer. It will take the feed from the plastic and it will sort of design into three-dimensional piece.
Achha, how big it can come? I mean, big things also?
Depends upon the sort of printer actually. What size you have. In the area of the printer, how much big it is.
Oh, really? Anyway, interesting. Okay. So anyway, let's not go into that, otherwise we'll get lost with... Okay. Very good. So here that concept is there here, where in the Karana Samudra there is a reflection of the spiritual world and that reflection is the material worlds. But Bhaktivedanta Purana Maharaj says that when that contaminated consciousness, that ahankar is added, then you see perversion in the reflection. that means you see people coming out with this perversive consciousness to enjoy this matter. You say this is perverted reflection. So this is how ultimately this world becomes a perverted reflection. The world is a reflection, but along with contaminated consciousness, it becomes perverted reflection, because contaminated consciousness wishes to do extremely stupid things. You know, in the sense that, like, people are, like we say in English also, we say this often, this fellow is very perverted. Perverted as in he really wishes to do something really very ghastly, or he has extreme perverse desires in terms of, you know, how you enjoy. I think Deenabandhu Chaitanya Prabhu, he was just sharing with me recently, he told me that he was in Sahyadri hospital. So he was telling me that his doctor was kind of challenging him. Why do you chant Hare Krishna? You should do social service. So he just asked him, okay, what social service are you doing? So he said, I serve in slums. He said, what do you do in slum? He said that, so that time he started revealing. This doctor apparently is working in slums. So he said it seems that majority of the, you know, the slum children are abused by their own fathers. You know, girls at the age of 6, 7, they are abused, physically violated. And they really, so he was like shocked. He was saying, do their fathers do such things? So he said, yes, it seems there are people who do that also on their daughters. So he was saying that such children, when they become 10, 11, 12, they suffer a lot of psychological challenges. So he's specialized in that treatment for such girls. And he was saying, this is what I do. So you should also do something like that. So he was like, so when I heard that, we realized that, you know, there are people who are extremely perverted. So this is perversion. I mean, there's a height of perversion, extremely gross. But there are various perversions at different levels. So when that contaminated consciousness is added, then the reflection, you see perversions. And that is called as perverted reflection. So he says that this Mahat Tattva is of two types. One type is the pure Mahat Tattva, which is only the matter, which is the reflection. And when the contaminated consciousness is added, when the ego is added, basically, that is the contaminated consciousness. And when the time is added, everything starts working. Now, time ka significance we will see very soon. There is a very important thing in it. So that's the difference between reflection and perversion reflection. Another interesting thing. So now we are actually coming to various lessons that we can learn from this. So, you know, that is the second part of my presentation. That means, what all can we learn from this entire model of creation? That means, why is the Bhagavatam explaining things like this? So there are many purposes. So first thing we understand is, so of course, till now already some things I already said when I introduced the model itself. But now we are going on to something more. So the next important thing that we learn from this model is the importance of this ego. Remember, I had told you recently that Ahankar is the first product of Mahat Tattva that comes out. And when Ahankar is successively added, things become more and more gross. So this Ahankar, so why does the Bhagavatam describe it like this? The Bhagavatam describes it like this in order to teach us that Ahankar is the switch. That means if you want to get out of this whole cycle, you have to change your false ego. From the position of thinking I am the enjoyer to the position I am servant of Krishna. So when we switch from that position, it is explained that things start falling in line. So currently, so because of the Ahankar, the output of Ahankar is basically the desire to exploit the world. And instead of making that desire to exploit the world, you make that desire as desire to serve. Once that is done, even though you're experiencing, you're doing service only with gross things in the world, everything is gross here. But still, Krishna allows that energy to be converted. And he allows that material energy in your case or our case, when we are acting like that, as spiritual energy. Which is what Prabhupada explains, that, you know, the electricity can be used for heating or cooling. It just depends how you use it. So the Ahankar basically has to be switched. So it is explained. So why this model is explained here? Because this Ahankar plays this role. So that's why, I mean, I was also reflecting how our Maharaj so much emphasizes on, you know, false ego and, you know, humility. Because that is considered to be the switch actually. That is considered the switch that moves us from the material world to the spiritual domain. And once one does that, one's door to liberation is open. Once if you can surely do it, then that door is open. So that is another interesting lesson that we learn. That's the second lesson, that ego as the key switch. Because the more and more ego if we add in our life is set to become more and more grosser. So that's the idea. That means the more and more if we develop our false ego to enjoy the world, then we have to experience more and more grosser realities. That's why the demigods, it is said that they live in worlds where there is no gross matter only. Like for example, if you go to Brahma's abode, there is nothing gross there. Everything is subtle only. It's a subtle world. After Swargaloka, everything is subtle actually. It's not gross. Because, so as you come down in the universal hierarchy, you have to experience more and more grossness. Because of more and more ego and more tamas. So the more ego, the more tamas, the more gross the experience. That means you try to really exploit gross matter to see whether you can suck any juice out of it. So basically it's something like that. Right? So, and the lesser the ego, the more divine one is. So the Devata position is also like that only. That's why they're actually considered divine. But even beyond that, if one can completely switch it over to Krishna's service, that ego, then one basically enters the spiritual world. So that's why the first creation of Mahat Tattva is very significant, Ahankar. Because that is a switch that moves things from here to there. That's how it is explained.
Please explain that last to go is ego from the body.
Huh?
Last to go from our body is the ego.
Last to go as in what?
Like, whenever you are leaving the people,
I heard this, I don't know.
Yeah.
Last to go from the heart, from the body.
Last thing to give up is ego.
Last to give up. Among all the possible things to leave. Like, last thing that will be going is...
Yeah, no, I understand.
Last layer.
No, this is, I'll tell you why. It is both ways. It is like this. I'll come to that point. That point actually comes very soon. It's like this. There is the cause and there is the effect. Okay? The cause is ego. The effect is what you see. So generally in this world, this is actually explained in one lecture by Bhaktividya Purna Maharaj. So I'll tell you how he explains it. He says that the cause has made the effect happen. Okay? The cause has made the effect happen. So why am I sitting in this body with flesh, bones and everything? Such gross stuff, It's because of the ego that this body has come. So there are two ways you attack it. One way is bottom up and another is top down. So, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshava. Krishna says, first control your senses. Papmanam brajehyanam jnana vijnana nashanam. I think it's 3.41 or 42. Because Krishna says, first start regulating your senses. Because in this world, when the gross realities have already happened, you have to start managing the gross. You try the reverse process. Correct? Like for example, an example is given, just like when a devotee comes to temple for service, we tell him, Prabhuji, wash the pot. वो पूछता है pot wash करने से क्या होगा? थोड़ा और humble हो जाओगे. इतना बड़ा engineer है, professor है तो बर्तन दो बैठ के. So he starts washing the pot. So he's doing a very gross activity. But because he's in a very gross reality, he needs to do that. To, kind of, to go back. So that's what in the footsteps of what Krishna says. From bottom you go up now. But while you are doing that, this is also important. To attack at the root only. That means slowly you will keep cutting all the leaves of the tree, thinking that the root will go one day. वो बहुत बड़ा process है वो root पे एक मारना पड़ता है बीच में. Only the tree is going to fall down. That means, like in the Bhagavad Gita, that whole thing is there in the 15th chapter, Purushottama Yoga, where our material existence is compared to a tree. You want to attack the tree or to hit at the root also. And because that root is Ahankar, the Shastra also says, though you start from the senses, like Krishna is saying, Tasmat tvam indriyanyadhau. Though you start from external reality and go inwards, simultaneously you have to hit the root as well. Otherwise, perhaps that, so you attack from both places. So that's what I was saying, bottom up and top down. So you go this way and you go that way as well. Only then the problem is solved. So, but the ego is considered extremely important because of the switch, basically. So that's actually considered the root. Because that is from where everything has come. And this is another reason why the Bhagavatam presents the reality like this. So, it is explained that why Bhagavatam presents creation in the universe. So, the question is asked, why is Bhagavatam presenting creation in Bhagavatam, basically? I mean, why is Shukadeva Goswami, what is his purpose of presenting creation here? His purpose of presenting creation here is for you to understand how to break that cycle. So, he has presented from that perspective. So, that is why it is said that our scientist folks are not interested in this model. Because the scientist folks are interested to understand the creation model from the perspective of how to exploit it and enjoy it. Not from the perspective of how to break that cycle. But the Bhagavatam's prime motivation is Pancham Purushartha, Bhakti, to take you to that. And until they actually make you hit at that route, you are not going to take it very, you or me, whatever, you're not going to take it very seriously. So they have presented creation model from that perspective. So that's the real point here. Yeah, makes sense? Yeah, good. Yeah, so that's why the ego is considered as a switch. Because so it has to be attacked. So it's not that we only work from the gross to the subtle. You may do that in the external world. But then ultimately you have to constantly hit at the root also if you want the tree to fall down. Yeah. So basically, so this is another thing. This is actually again from Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj. So he explains that the default characteristic of Tamogun, of the Mahat Tattva, is that it acts as mundane. It acts as mundane. That means the default it acts extremely mundane. See, this sentence is very important because this sentence, what it implies is Mahat Tattva acts by default as mundane. The implication of that is, by definition, the world is created in such a way that if you want to believe, there is no God, there is no higher reality, you can be very comfortable with that feeling. There is, right? There are many atheistic people, if you talk to them, they will tell you, Bhagwan ko koi zarurat hi nahi, sab kuch first class hai idhar. Because the default platform of Mahat Tattva is to create it in a mundane fashion, where you don't see spiritual reality. That's what you wanted. So you're given that situation. Be very happy in this illusion. Default is mundane. So that's why dealing with the Mahat Tattva, so I have not written that key word, but this is all we are talking about Mahat Tattva only. The default situation of Mahat Tattva is mundane, but to deal with the Mahat Tattva, spiritual energy of Krishna comes from the mercy of Guru and Sadhu. And when that is there, you get the same result as dealing with Krishna, because by the mercy, so the Lord is so amazing that on one hand He has created the material world in such a way that you can look at the material world completely in a fashion as if there is no God. And on the other hand, you can use every ingredient of the world in the sense that I want to serve God with it, and that's also fine. And we will see that also later. That description comes very soon. So this is so amazing, right? On one hand, a fellow can be happy in the world thinking that there is no God, like so many people. On the other hand, you could actually make it completely spiritual if you wish to. Simultaneously, you can do it. What a amazing creation. That's why it is called as the Lord's pastimes of the material world. It's an amazing pastime if you look at it that way. Yeah. So these are some lessons we are learning. So we are just at the fourth one. So there's several more to come. So the next one which I want to say is, so this is like, I have just taken randomly from different places in the scripture. So this is very beautiful, this lesson. Like in the Bhagavatam, if you see, in the 3rd canto, 26th chapter. Now I'll just briefly just, read a small part and just show you what I am actually trying to hit at. So if you see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, one second. Yeah, if you see 3rd canto, 26th chapter, text number 62. One second. I have Veda base here. One second. I'll just... yeah, one second. I'll just go to my Veda base. Just one second. One second. I'll just go to the Veda base. Is it raining? No. So बारिश जैसा आवाज आ रहा है. Illusion, huh? 3rd canto. So this currently I'm looking from the 3rd canto, chapter 26. Text number 62. Just one second. Yeah, so if you see text 62 here, this whole description is actually, the Bhagavatam presents a very metaphysical description of the universe. Metaphysical description, because the main goal of the metaphysical, which you understand, right? It is not presented in a way that you will understand how you will manipulate matter, because that's not the goal of the Bhagavatam, to allow the scientist to look at it and manipulate matter. The goal is to understand spiritual reality. So everything is presented like that only. It's a true presentation, but at the same time it's presented in a way that you understand reality from it. Okay, so if you see this verse, this is a very beautiful series of verses. When the demigods and presiding deities of the various senses were thus manifested, they wanted to wake their origin of appearance. But on failing to do so, they re-entered the body of the Virat Purusha one after another in order to wake him. Okay, so this is the theme. And then you will see all these verses, which are pretty metaphysical. So for example, it says, the god of fire entered his mouth with the organ of speech, but the Virat Purusha could not be aroused. Then the god of the wind entered the nostrils with the sense of smell, but still the Virat Purusha refused to be awakened. So this whole thing comes that all the demigods tried to awaken the Virat Purusha, but the Virat Purusha did not get up. So it looks very amusing as to what's happening actually, right? But the end is very clear, and the end actually conveys what the Bhagavatam wants to say. The ocean entered abdomen, but the cosmic being refused to rise. Moon god entered his heart with the mind, but cosmic being would not be moved. So everything says that none of the demigods could awaken, but the last one is beautiful. Okay, this is the point. However, when the inner controller, the deity presiding over consciousness, this is Paramatma, the lord of the chitta. So remember, in our one of our diagrams over here, ये जो इसमें ना हमने एक देखा था. कहाँ है?
4 things in Adya.
Yeah, so if you see here, right? Yeah, this consciousness, chitta is ruled by Chaitya Guru. This is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So none of these people could awaken, none of the demigods, but when he entered, then, so we'll just go back to the Bhagavatam 1 second. When the inner controller, the deity presiding over consciousness, entered the heart with reason, at that very moment, the cosmic being rose from the causal waters. So there is a very interesting lesson or the teaching Bhagavatam wants to say. The idea is, when a man is sleeping, all his material assets, namely his vital energy, energy for recording knowledge, energy for working, mind and intelligence cannot arouse him. He can be aroused only when the super soul helps him. Basically, the important lesson is that the super soul plays the most important role in awakening your system. If you have heard the DD series, where the Bhakti-Rasamrita Maharaj speaks about Paramatma, he says this also actually, that is the super soul only actually who reminds us every day morning. He awakens us and he reminds what you are supposed to do. So if you have heard Bhakti-Rasamrita Maharaj lecture, on Paramatma, he says there that this Paramatma awakens us and says, Mr. So-and-so, now it's already 9 o'clock, you have to get ready and go to office, please get away and work quickly. So that Matta Smritir Jnana Mapohanamcha, that memory, knowledge, forgetfulness, everything is given by the super soul. So he actually awakens us literally. And that's the idea Bhagavatam wants to convey. By saying that none of the other demigods are as important as the Lord of the Chitta. So that means even if the sun god is there through our eyes, it's nothing going to work. But this Paramatma has to be present. That's the lesson that they want to say. You understood? So this is what metaphysical means. They want to give a... Sorry, I have too many things open over here. Yeah, so that's another very interesting lesson, which the fifth lesson which I'm saying, that the Purusha is awakened only when the super soul enters. And this Purusha not only refers to the cosmic Purusha, but even this individual Purusha, each of us. Not awakened only after our sleep, but even after our Sushupti. That means when you are, so the Bhakti-Rasamrita Maharaj explains in that lecture, if you hear, that even when the soul is in Mahavishnu's body at the time of cosmic annihilation, after the annihilation is over, who is going to awaken us and remind us of our desires? The Lord of Chitta does it. He awakens all the souls and says, come on, now you have to do so many things. In fact, on this, there is a very beautiful Sri Vaishnava writing, which I liked very much. So the Sri Vaishnava, he says that how Paramatma feels when the soul is sleeping. Sushupti. He says, you heard that, right? So that means when the Sushupti, deep sleep we say, right? When the soul is sleeping. So he says that the Paramatma feels like the mother. He says just like the mother, when there are many naughty children she has, and all the children are causing huge chaos at home, the mother is very angry and she beats them up and makes them sleep. She says, Sab so jao abhi. But when they all fall asleep, when the mother looks at the sleeping children, she feels compassion. She feels, because the sleeping child generally looks very sweet. And we all have the experience as parent. When the child is sleeping, the child looks so innocent and sweet. But when the child is awake, it's like disaster. So the example is a very beautiful example. The Sri Vaishnava example. Very beautiful example. Analogy is perfect. That the mother, when she looks at the naughty child, she decides that बहुत हो गया, बदमाशी बंद करो, सो जाओ अभी. फिर एक बार सो गए, उनको देख के करुणा आती है. Similarly, the Lord feels, it seems, when all the living entities in the universe are doing various mischief to enjoy the world, he feels better to put these people in Sushupti. But when he puts them into Sushupti and he looks at all the sleeping souls, he feels, oh my God, these people are all sleeping, poor thing. Let's give another chance now. Let's awaken them and try to engage them with something. Very beautiful analogy. So, yeah, so the super soul entering is very significant here, right? The awakening Purusha only when the super soul enters. That's the only time it happens, right? Let's go ahead to some more thing. Yeah, this human body diseases are already covered. That how all our diseases are again solved in two ways. In a higher sense by worshipping a devata, but even if somebody says, I don't want to do that, but in connection with that entity in the world which represents that, right? Like there is Samudra Devata, but somebody may say, I don't believe in Samudra Devata, but then the ocean is there. If you are not feeling hungry, you can take bath in the ocean, which is like a gross representative of the Samudra Devata. And that also cures your disease. You know, so we can see that also very beautiful. This lesson is coming from here only, from this concept only of the Bhagavatam. So these are some lessons. Some more lessons. Yeah, so this I think I already told you, that the Bhagavatam explains everything very metaphysically. Why it explains metaphysically? Because their goal is very clear. They want us to learn how to cut everything and get out. And not how to get more caught up, in the material world. And the another thing is, gross to subtle or subtle to gross. I was about to explain it, but Prabhuji already asked that question. So I was making this point, right? Actually, everything is from subtle to gross only. But now, because we are in the gross reality, we have to go back in reverse gear. So we go from gross to subtle. Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshabha. We have to go back from that. So like Krishna says, right? Suppose if you control your mind, Yastvindriyani manasa niyam yarabate Arjuna. You have to start with the mind, but Krishna says that mityacharasa uchyate, right? One who controls his mind but doesn't control the external senses, he is a pretender. So Krishna says, tasmata indriyani, regulate your senses first. So when you are too gross, then you have to start reverse. But ultimately you have to hit at the root also, which is that false ego, which actually breaks everything. Okay, now we have a very interesting chart. Actually, I wanted to make a nice table, but I did not have time, so I just kind of typed it out like that. But this explains, there are these three things, there are the several groups of three that comes in this entire pastime. And this also has several lessons. So the main lesson comes at the end of it, but let us see it one by one. The first thing is, we all know that there is Satchit Ananda. So that means the Atma has these three properties: eternity, knowledge and bliss. This eternity, knowledge and bliss actually comes from Sandhini, Samvit, Ladini of the spiritual world. So there is Sandhini, which is basically existential potency of the Lord. There is Samvit, which is the knowledge potency, Balramji. And there is Ladini, which is of course, Ram is extremely happy to hear Ladini. But here the Ladini is the spiritual, the bliss potency of the Lord. Correct? Now these three things in the material world come like this: Dravya, Kriya, Jnana. Now from here there will be some explanation that's needed. So the Bhagavad explains that Sandhini, existential thing in the world, comes as objects in a very gross way. So in this world, people are behind gross things that exist, right? Everybody is behind gross dravya. Dravya means gross substances. So remember, this is basically coming from that. You remember that? Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti and Dravya Shakti. Did I call it like that? Yeah? Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti and Dravya Shakti. So this is basically Dravya. The Chit is Kriya, because when one, so we will explain that also very soon, why it is like that. So one actually endeavors with one's senses to obtain knowledge of various things, and Jnana actually leads to Ladini. So that means the real knowledge, when it starts getting awakened, that means in the Sattva Guna, you start experiencing pleasure. That's why that Jnana Shakti is related to that. Yeah, I know. So here also, this will also come, that passion will also come here very soon. Actually, I didn't have time to order it nicely. I wanted to make a better table, but for lack of time, I just typed three things. So I have to just explain everything one by one. So actually the connection, I have not made it very nicely. There are 10 things of 3, 10 sets of 3. Unfortunately, I just did not have time to put them in one line. So it's kind of a little bit arbitrary now. But anyway, we'll nevertheless try to do whatever we can. So there is Dravya, Kriya, Jnana. But then that is actually coming from this: Karyatvam, Karanatvam and Kartritvam. Okay, so Karyatvam, Karanatvam means effect. Karanatvam means instrument, right? and kartatvam means doer, right? So there is the effect, which is the dravya, there is the instrument, which is the kriya, there is a doer, which is actually the jnana. Okay, so this is also called as adi bhautik. The dravya is called adi bhautik because this is in this context, bhautik is not that other living entity. Bhautik is considered bhautik as in gross elements, whereas the karanatvam is considered adhyatmik because that is considered the individual senses and intelligence, the endeavor. And the devatas, the jnana, is called as adi daivik because they are the actual doers. You know, they are actually doing everything. So as I had mentioned earlier, this dravya is a product of tamas, kriya is a product of rajas, jnana is a product of sattva. So the idea is that all these things are connected. So basically everything is coming from Ladini Shakti only, all these things. That means sattva is coming from that only, in this material world. I mean the manifestation of Ladini in this material world is sattva. Because in sattva there is happiness, right? Sattva sanjayate jnanam sukham, we say that, right? That from sattva only comes actually happiness. From the passionate endeavor of the world, you understand things of this world. You know, you get chit, you understand things in that sense. So, and the reality that exists is everything gross. You know, so that's tamas. So this is basically also called tamas. This is called taijasa, and that is called vaikarika. And the dravya is also, so everything you have to please relate to dravya. Dravya is called dull, kriya is active, jnana is called serene. Right? Kriya is active, jnana is called serene. Now the last thing is perhaps the most important of them. So dravya, sorry, this is not the last, second last. Dravya is the paraphernalia, kriya is endeavors, and jnana is knowledge. Okay, so now here is the most important point. What is the actual application of this whole thing? The actual application of whole thing, why we have to understand this is because how the soul can connect these things to Krishna. So that's actually the main lesson Bhagavatam is trying to teach. So the last thing is the most important. The importance is, it depends on who you are and you can decide how to connect to Krishna. So the idea is, if someone is actually interested in objects and dravya, he uses objects in the service of Krishna. If somebody is mainly interested in doing things, then he uses his senses in service to Krishna. And if somebody is interested in the Jnana Shakti, you simply by hearing the Bhagavatam, you try to understand how the magic of Krishna consciousness works. You understood? See, there are three ways of serving Krishna, right? One is the hearing chanting process, where you are sitting and hearing Bhagavat. You are hearing the scripture. So that hearing scripture, that is basically dovetailing the Jnana Shakti in connection to Krishna. Where you are trying to understand how Krishna consciousness works and you connect that to God. But somebody will say that मेरे को इसमें ज़्यादा दिलचस्पी नहीं है, बहुत मुश्किल है हमको. तो ठीक है, आपको क्या अच्छा लगता है, आपको काम करना अच्छा लगता है, very good. So use all your senses and endeavor. So that is basically engaging the adhyatmic, the instrument. So basically the Bhagavatam, this is actually there. The goal of presenting the Bhagavatam, presenting everything as dravya, kriya and jnana, these three things, is to give us this lesson, that how you connect them back to God. Either by understanding the process of Krishna consciousness by hearing, or by actually using your senses in physical service, mandira marjanado, everything. Or somebody will say, see, if you see also, like, that's why, the hearing process is given so much importance. Hearing Bhagavatam is considered so important. Because that is actually doing this work of understanding how Krishna consciousness works, where you connect it back. But there will be, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, and many people will say that this hearing is very difficult. Actually, if you see, this is easiest, using objects. What are the most easiest way to serve Krishna? Giving donation. Paisa de do apna, Bhagavan ki seva mein. Because dravya, you can, that's the most gross, that's tamas. So most people find that easy. But using rajas or the instrument is senses. But the Bhagavatam's model of presenting everything in the world as kriya, jnana and dravya is to basically tell us that there are these three ways in which you can connect it back. And in any of the ways, you will get the same result. You basically break the cycle of birth and death and you go back. So this is another important lesson. why everything is presented as Dravya, Kriya and Jnana.
Still, is it that something is better than the other? Though the
Yeah, it is. In of course, in an absolute sense, it's never like that. Because in an absolute sense, any way you serve Krishna is fantastic.
But is it that still that?
Yeah, that depends on your consciousness and everything.
But is it that still that the last one is?
Yeah, donation is also, this is not donation season, that's why we are talking all this. But for June, July, we would have emphasized Dravya only. First Dravya, Prabhu. First Dravya. ये सब ठीक है, बाद में देख लेंगे. पहला द्रव्य निकालो. जो आपने द्रव्य संचित किया हुआ है दुनिया में, वो भगवान की सेवा में, ठाकुर जी की सेवा में चढ़ा दो. So it all depends on time, place and circumstance, the preacher and his message. Right? But that's how it is. So this is actually considered a very important lesson of this particular table.
The last one is best.
Yeah, of course. In some ways, if you see, absolutely it is, right. Like even if you see Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita 12.8 to 12.12, what is he saying? It's something in that around only. So if you see, for example, using the senses, and that is 12.9, 10, right? And then those who cannot do that, and then finally, at least give something to me. So it is like that. In a way, it is like that only. But still, you cannot say it like that, because as he pointed, it depends on your consciousness, and also ultimately, we have to use all three, because how many of us are actually in Sattva Guna to claim that, I need only this? We are caught up in Dravya also, right? In the task of accumulating gross substances. So, there's no question that we can say that. Okay. Another interesting thing is, lesson from this whole thing is, so if you remember, we had discussed, so this is another lesson that comes from the Bhagavatam's creation. Sound starts the creation of all gross substances. So Prabhupada emphasizes this point so much, that sound creates the gross material world and sound finishes it. Okay, so Prabhupada also says that not only sound finishes gross things, you get attracted to gross things in the world also by sound only. You hear about some very nice thing, like somebody hears about the glories of America and he feels that I should go to America. We hear, it's by hearing process that you get attracted to something. So the sound creates material existence, anavriti shabdhat, as the Vedanta Sutra says. Anavriti shabdhat. It is by shabda that everything is finished off. So again, the chanting process comes here. So why that sound is first? So please remember, it is not that Shukadeva Goswami made up a particular creation story for us to get out. This is actually, this is the vision of a great sage of how the creation actually happened, but from the perspective of helping us how to get out. So that's the whole purpose of the Bhagavatam. Right? So after having explained so much, now we are coming to the very last point. Now this last point is a bit scientific and a little technical, but maybe I'll just take 5 minutes to complete it. And this last point is that the Bhagavatam creation model also is in great synchrony with, sorry to say or surprise anybody, but with the Big Bang theory model. So we will go to that now. And we will see Prabhupada's comment on Big Bang, what actually Prabhupada talks about Big Bang model. So that's the next thing. So there is Pradhan on one side, the creation entity, and there is singularity. Singularity, the references that are there are from the Stephen Hawking and all those guys. What they say about the universe. So have a look at this. The Pradhan says, unmanifest, undifferentiated form of matter, no manifestation of gross subtle element is the first thing. Big Bang says no formation of matter or space. The Pradhan says undifferentiated yet total material elements and content therein, void and no space, total matter and zero space, infinity, density. The singularity says contained all of the matter of the universe condensed in infinitely small point of zero space. Total matter in zero space is infinite density. You understood? So we are just looking at the parallel. Now we will see where Big Bang and our Shastra differs. Okay, what happened? Why are you surprised? That we are trying to prove Big Bang. Eh? Tomorrow in the temple, if somebody will meet you. Tomorrow in the temple, somebody can ask you, what you did in Kausari meeting yesterday? We proved Big Bang, right? My God, what the hell is happening? Yeah, that is ultimately. Like, I think Gaurav Prabhu or someone had heard. The goal of a preacher is to make a stable person confused and a confused person stable. So first, somebody who is stable in the material world, usko confuse karo, usko payment karo. बहुत build करो, वापस चाल करो. but in the meanwhile you connect him to Krishna, so you achieve your goal. You understood? वो अभी फिलहाल बहुत शांत है माया में, तो उसको अनस्टेबल कर ले, फिर वो अनस्टेबिलिटी में भगवान से जुड़ा है, फिर वापस शांत कर ले, तो वही प्रोसेस है यहाँ पर भी. For so many years we say something and then we just change the whole thing. Okay, have a look at it. Okay. No manifestation of cause or effect, no reaction of material elements. All laws of physics break down. So please remember, this is from Bhagavatams and that is from Big Bang. Okay. I'll end with Prabhupada's quote. So you will have to take it. Prabhupada actually says that Big Bang is right. So I'll end with that quote. Yeah. So seriously, believe me, it's actually a right theory. We'll come to that very soon. Why Prabhupada says like that? Hold on. I'll not allow anybody to go out of the room with half-hearted knowledge and put me in trouble. See, I'm putting my reputation at stake. I'm getting it recorded, ready to put it on YouTube. So, okay, look at this. No time. Bhagavatam says time is equal to zero, singularity says. Okay. Indescribable, the Bhagavatam says, cannot be described by any mathematical, physical model, it says. Original substance, Pradhan. It is the actual basis of material creation. The origin of universe. Which is the origin of universe? Singularity. You understood? What Bhagavatam calls Pradhan, these guys are calling singularity. That's what we want to say. Okay, hold on. No consciousness soul, nothing is there. Still now everything okay? So they're talking about the same entity, huh? नाम अलग दिया बस. ये प्रधान के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, वो बात कर रहे हैं singularity के बारे में. Okay, let's go ahead now. Now Bhagavatam. Time is injected into Pradhan. The Pradhan is agitated and begins to manifest. Time starts and the process begins. That's what singularity is. It's just the same thing. But just that it talks about singularity, we are talking about Pradhan. Okay? Cause. Time is injected by the glance of the Lord Mahavishnu. Now here is where it differs. The cause of the Big Bang is admitted as unknown. तो यहाँ पर फर्क है. यहाँ glance है भगवान का. तो एक difference है. Major difference. Everybody is happy, right? Everybody is extremely enjoyed. But the point is, it is there, na? By glancing, the Lord also injects souls with the respective karma. Either not applicable. उनका है ही नहीं कुछ. Soul आने का कुछ फंडा ही नहीं उनके पास. Because everything is coming from this thing. But the point is still now everything is okay, right? Now let's go ahead. Now how creation happens. Now this is also from Bhagavatam. I'm sorry, I think this is not very clear maybe. I'll just try to see if I can do something in my Mac Air. Is clear? Okay. First, the interaction of the modes of nature and the manifestation of subtle element occurs. Big Bang doesn't say anything. Now see, from false ego, because see Big Bang, see the scientists, you know what, they talk only gross. Subtle, they don't talk at all. So whenever you see something like Mahavishnu, Atma, ये सब जब आप देखते हो ना, वो बिग बैंग में नहीं रहेगा, क्योंकि ये लोग सटल रियलिटी के बारे में बात नहीं करते, ग्रॉस रियलिटी बात करते. ग्रॉस रियलिटी मैच होता है क्या? होता है. That's the point really we're talking. The Big Bang is correct. Okay. From false ego, the first of 5 elements, the sky is generated. This is Bhagavatam model. Sky is generated. Now look at Big Bang. This is Stephen Hawking's writings, by the way. First, the universe expands exponentially from an infinitely small point, creating space. Creating space. वही हमारा sky है. Same term. Bhagavatam. Because the sky is transformed, air is generated. अभी Big Bang देखो, Stephen Hawking. As space expands, the universe cools down, enabling formation of fundamental particles and eventually lighter atoms such as hydrogen and helium. Due to gravity, these elements cluster together in space, forming gas clouds. They're talking about that. Okay. Then next, when the air is transformed in the course of time and nature's course, fire is generated. Now let's look at what the Big Bang says. As the gas clouds becomes denser, gravitational collapse causes atomic fusion, and thus forming stars, which releases light and heat. This is the end of the dark age of universe, as the universe begins to have visible light. They just talk a little more complicated terminology because they are more interested in manipulating, as I said. But ultimately the flow is the same. It's not that we created the flow. Flow वैसे ही है. Now let's see what Bhagavatam says. Since fire is also transformed, there is manifestation of water. Look at what Big Bang says. Within the core of the star, atomic fusion generates heavier elements such as carbon and oxygen. When the star dies, it explodes, releasing the elements into space. Water is formed here due to the chemical reaction between oxygen and hydrogen. So उसके बाद water ही आता है उनके इसमें भी. Then the earth becomes manifest. Bhagavatam says, they say due to gravity, the exploded star dust further clusters together, forming planets. In earthly space, process forms soil or earth. All gross is matches. Is everyone happy with Stephen Hawking?
Plagiarism का case
हॉकिंस पे प्रेरिंग नहीं करना पड़ेगा, भागवत से कॉपी किया, लेकिन वो बोलेगा मैंने नहीं कॉपी किया, मैं बिना भागवत पढ़े किया. But anyway, now let's see what Prabhupada says. The most important thing. Prabhupada did not reject, rather points out the limitation of the Big Bang theory. Prabhupada's focus was to establish Lord Krishna as the cause of all causes. For example, in the following lecture, where Prabhupada was asked about Big Bang explosion, Prabhupada accepted it as not just a theory but fact. Prabhupada accepted it as fact, comparing it to the Srimad Bhagavatam, emphasizing on the cause. Now look at Prabhupada's quote. Yeah. Lecture Adi Leela, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Explosion? Yes. So they are seeing that explosion and the chunk, but they cannot explain how the chunk became exploded. Matter energy itself cannot explode. The explosion theory is there, not theory, fact. You understood? Fact. Big Bang is true. But the total material energy, the Mahat Tattva, when it is glanced over by Mahavishnu, then it becomes agitated and the modes of material nature begin to act. So then these activities are executed by Mahavishnu by his glancing, simply by his glancing. So simply by his glancing, he can agitate the material energy and the creation begins. Prabhupada's lecture. That means the point is Prabhupada holds in that whole thing that Mahavishnu's glance as important, which these people obviously cannot see. So let's remember, when these people are saying something from their perspective. So when I read or came across this whole thing, I realized that simply with we deal with the scientific community. Simply we cannot bash people. We have to try to see how you can add Krishna over there instead of saying that everything is what you have discovered is all nonsense. It's not like that actually, because it's not.
Impact of saying what we will say now.
Yeah.
Won't be that when we said in the device.
You can still say that in the device, because I told you our goal is to make a peaceful person confused and then the confused person again peaceful. So in some sense we'll continue to do that. I'll just complete it, then I'll take questions. 1 minute. और है इसमें. Stephen Hawking के ग्रंथ से अभी भागवतम से. Events before the Big Bang are simply not defined because there is no way one could measure what happened at them. These had to be imposed on the universe by some external agency. Stephen Hawking के book से निकाला ये point. So Stephen Hawking says, what Stephen Hawking is the don, is the acharya in this field, by the way. So he says that these had to be imposed on the universe by some external energy. Who is that external energy? Mahavishnu ki jai.
Been a Vedic scholar, maybe he has done big offense and penalty.
I don't know that. We don't want to give him too much credit. Yeah, joking. The cause for the Big Bang is admitted as unknown by today's science. Moreover, scientists believe that the cause must be beyond space and time, outside our experience and due to external energy. At present, there are many speculative theories. There is quantum fluctuation, big bounce, multiverse, quantum gravity, loop, M theory, God, etc. As far as science is concerned, the idea that God caused Big Bang is just as speculative as other theories. You understood this? From scientific perspective, this idea does not carry any additional weightage and contains similar pros and cons compared with other theories. मतलब साइंस के जो भी थियोरी है to explain how Big Bang started, they are all equally speculative only. And science itself says it's so. That's why if you see, our Bhagavatam model, it's actually very rigorous. See, again, you have to understand these Europeans, when they discovered these things, you see the Christian model. It is so. It basically says, the Bible says the God created man from the dust, man from the dust of the earth 6,000 years before. Extremely simplistic model of creation. You understood? So the Europeans, when they dug the earth and saw, they understood, man, come on, this world is much older than 6,000 years. What nonsense? How can we believe this? But if you see our Shastra, they do talk about such concepts. And you can actually understand. So it's not just making up, but it is there. That's what Prabhupada is saying, that we accept it. However, we find in the ancient Srimad Bhagavatam giving knowledge consistent with modern scientific theory. Note that Big Bang theory is less than 1 century old and it was developed based on complex physics and using high-tech equipment. The state of singularity in Big Bang, which is a prediction, Einstein theory of general relativity, is beyond the ability of any human mind to grasp, is strikingly similar to the state of Pradhan as discussed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You have to talk to people like Rasaraj Prabhu actually. They will tell that most of what scientists say are correct only. It is just that quantum mechanics, everything. He can explain everything from Bhagavatam perspective. He says that just that Krishna aspect is not there. See, because these people are using gross senses, they talk gross, that's all.
Actually, there is a lecture, Velpudi Krishna.
Yeah.
He talks about this
Mic.
series called Bhagavatam Muttukal, where he takes some themes
So one of these things is how creation is created. So he speaks the whole thing, and at the end he says, I will mix with English and speak for some 5-10 minutes, where he brings out the Big Bang and some 2-3 theories, and how he says all these things are there, and only thing is they don't know what is the cause. Like that he concludes.
Yeah, correct. Okay. Velugu is a very famous Sri Vaishnava speaker. Velugudi Krishna.
He speaks about the Big Bang.
We people hear him. That's why we know. He's sharing that. Doesn't all these indicate the credibility of Bhagavatam? Wouldn't Bhagavatam be a reasonably valid source to gain knowledge which are beyond the scope of empirical science? That's the point. The Bhagavatam is talking only metaphysical. The Bhagavatam's goal is that. Because the Shastra's goal, in fact, we were also hearing this, another Sri Vaishnava scholar. So he basically says that the Shastra never lays emphasis on things which you can find with your gross senses. उनका काम ही नहीं है बोले वो. Because Shastra's perspective, at least the transcendental domain, is to teach you things which you cannot find with your gross senses. They are not interested in that. The transcendental part of the Shastra, like Bhagavat. They focus only on the metaphysical. Because that's their interest really. Because that's from their perspective, that's the highest thing. The whole purpose is to break the cycle of birth and death. And not to simply rot here and suffer. So they focus entirely on that. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So we end the class, but we can have some questions if any. Somebody you had a comment?
The glance of the Supreme Lord is again and again repeated. Like in 3rd canto. In
Yeah.
every verse it is being repeated. Mixed with the glance of the
Yeah,
Lord,
correct.
and this is
Yeah.
Mixed with the, so if
Yeah,
we-
mixed with the glance, yeah.
That means glance is not coming just once, because
Yeah, okay.
even in creating all these senses and
Yeah, perfect. So Shamla Bros is adding this very interesting, important point that it is not that the Lord glanced only once. He is continued to glance. And in fact, his glance is as such considered as Shambhu in an expanded sense. You know, the Lord's glance is also called as Shambhu in one sense. So basically, that glance is a very extremely important glance. So that's certainly there. That's what. They miss that part because they focus only on gross. That's the point. Good. Any other thing? ऊपर करो उसको. हाँ.
So if we see that, like scientists, means one way they have also come to some conclusion which is actually right.
Yeah, it is there.
So that means over a period of time, our senses can also relate to
Gross things.
the origin of this, which is
Yeah, but
actually
in a
true.
very gross way only. See, that's the whole problem. See, that's what I was telling you. In science, you know, you hit a barrier at that gross point. Like simple example you were giving earlier, like mind. These people are trying to understand the mind since 4 centuries. If you know, the French philosopher René Descartes is considered the father of Western philosophy. He is the fellow who first spoke about, he asked the question, is there a mind different from the body? तब से लेके आज तक ये लोग ढूंढ रहे कहाँ है mind. Now their understanding is that mind is nothing but hormonal change. Because that is the ultimate gross point where you stop. उसके बाद कुछ है ही नहीं है बॉडी में. मतलब आप माइक्रोस्कोप टेलीस्कोप ये सब से देखोगे तो शरीर में हार्मोनल चेंज के अलावा कुछ भी नहीं है जो आप मन की स्थिति को पहचान सकते हो. हैप्पीनेस वन हार्मोनल चेंज, फ्रस्ट्रेशन अनदर हार्मोनल चेंज. तो हार्मोनल चेंज को सेट करके वो लोग देखते भी है. हार्मोनल चेंज सेट किया तो तुम्हारा मन बदल गया क्या? बदल भी जाता है. Which is not surprising because in our understanding the subtle and gross are connected. So when you play with the gross, the subtle temporarily is fine only. That's why any psychiatrist will tell you that his treatment will last only for a short period of time. Because after some time what happens? Like a depressed man, वो pill लेता है. I know many depressed or psychic patients. When they take a pill, they sort out that problem temporarily, right? But then if they don't take the pill, again the problem will come because you are treating at the level of effect, not at the level of cause. It is like Radhesham Prabhu gives that example. When you take a big broom and you poke the kitten's face, the kitten is boxing the end of the broom without understanding you, the person behind it. But because he's boxing, he sees that for some time the broom moves away. So he feels that it works. But he's not understanding the cause only behind it. So something like that. तो ये लोग ग्रॉस पे अटक जाएंगे क्योंकि कुछ चीजों के लिए उनको शब्द प्रमाण स्वीकार करना पड़ेगा और उस शब्द प्रमाण स्वीकार करने को तैयार नहीं है. वो लोग बोलते हैं हम लोग वर्बल टेस्टिमनी एक्सेप्ट नहीं करेंगे, हम लोग खुद से ढूंढेंगे. तो वहां अटक जाएंगे वो लोग. लाइक स्टीफन हॉकिंग अटक गया. इसके बाहर क्या है कुछ तो है हमको नहीं मालूम. बट द होल पॉइंट इज वन इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इज दे मिस द गोल ऑफ लाइफ बिकॉज इन दिस दे आर स्टक विद द ग्रॉस बॉडी ओनली. वहां अटक गए होते हैं, गाड़ी आगे नहीं जाती. राइट, मेक सेंस. या एनी अदर क्वेश्चन और कमेंट? Yeah? Okay. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय. Big Bang Theory ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande. See, what happens na, see, I also realized, when a new person comes na, little bit you have to bash him up. Otherwise, what happens is, current conceptions are not broken. He has his current conceptions को थोड़ा तोड़ना पड़ता है. वो तोड़ते टाइम कुछ essential qualities भी टूट जाते हैं, फिर बाद में उसको जोड़ना पड़ता है. तोड़ो फिर वापस जोड़ो. So this is a preaching process in general. You break. Just like, sometimes, like I'll tell you a simple thing I've seen in our preaching to youth, you have to hammer some renunciation. Otherwise, they'll be too much attached. But then when you hammer renunciation at one point, it is so much that when like Nityananda Sabha and all, when we have to guide people for marriage, we have to again start saying that love your wife and all that stuff we have to again tell. Because previously we broke everything completely. We told what material love, you cockroach wife, kutta, dog wife, cat wife. ये सब बोल के उनका जो भी थोड़ा भी प्यार का टेंडेंसी था सब तोड़ दिया, खत्म कर दिया. फिर वो बोलते कि व्हाट प्रभु जी, व्हाई शुड आई लव, आई हैव डॉग वाइफ, कैट वाइफ, कॉकरोच. फिर बोले थे नहीं दिस इज कृष्णा गिवन वाइफ, यू शुड लव हर. फिर वो बोलते हाँ ठीक है बोलते. तो वही फिलोसफी ऑफ द पहला जो बहुत या द फेलो इज पीसफुल एजिटेटिव एंड देन लेटर व्हेन ही इज टू एजिटेटेड अगेन मेक हिम वेरी पीसफुल. दैट इज द प्रीचिंग प्रोसेस. Okay, we can just have some 5 minutes of kirtan, so some Mataji can lead some kirtan. Kirtan, you can lead some kirtan, 5 minutes. Question you have?
Actually,
Comment.
I was sharing with Mataji that because actually as youth devotees, we suffered a lot because of this immature and fanatic
No.
counseling given by devotees who were themselves fanatic, and they were also
I'll put it like this. I mean, before criticizing the devotees who gave us
our
spiritual,
children will never go through that.
No. Yeah, of course they will have other challenges. But what I wish to say, see what happens now. None of us came to Krishna consciousness organically. You understood? Organic growth, organic growth and inorganic growth बोलते हैं. हम लोग inorganic ले आए. हम लोग अपनी दुनिया में थे और वो दुनिया से हमको हिलाने के लिए थोड़ा स्ट्रॉन्ग डोज चाहिए था, नहीं तो हिलते ही नहीं थे कभी. You understood now? From that world to come out.
Yeah, but in that process we have offended our family members. We have offended.
Yeah, so that's what. No, so that is the
Correct.
No, that is a repercussion of the inorganic growth. See, please remember, inorganic growth का repercussion तो रहेगा ना. और हम ऐसे क्यों हुए? हम ही जिम्मेदार है उसके लिए. We were not ready to take Krishna consciousness from birth. That's why we got such an environment or whatever. We are only responsible, right?
Some mature trainings in the beginning would have really helped, because this kind of thing, brainwashing.
No. Sometimes I feel, even now if you tell me to preach to a youth who's in college, वो लड़की के साथ घूम रहा है, आराम से कर रहा है, उसको ना थोड़ा तो डोज देना ही पड़ता है. बहुत प्यार से बात करेंगे ना, उसको समझेगा ही नहीं मैसेज. You have to give him a little bit kick, because see, he's not at that stage. He has developed too many negative association. You have to put an end to everything. You have to pull him actually. So when you pull a person inorganically in that sense, I mean, I thought about it a lot actually, because I deal with the Nityananda Sabha boys. I always think preaching थोड़ा अलग हो सकता है क्या इनको, लगा नहीं हो सकता है actually, because the situation they come from is so gross and in many ways it is so contaminating that unless you're given boxed at that time, they will not come out actually. They may just remain where they are. I mean, I'm still thinking, how is it possible for anybody to do it that? So that's why it becomes like necessary. That becomes the necessity at that time. That's what I am currently feeling. My theory is at this point. Until it changes, I don't know. Yeah, she has some comment.
Like as you say, if we are not strong with them, in between we knew that people will be stuck in that this also, that also philosophy.
Yeah, निकलेंगे नहीं बाहर. मतलब, see what has happened is, we have now, after getting a deep appreciation and understanding of spiritual life, we are able to rectify our dealings in the material world. But when you are dealing with the material world improperly, so there itself you cannot correct that. You have to break it first and teach him here, and then you have to teach him how to deal with it. That material energy, how to deal with it. I thought about it a lot, because me, this Achyut Keshav Prabhu, we people deal with a lot with the Nityananda Sabha boys, and we have seen this actually. It's not easy actually to get these boys in Krishna consciousness unless you really give them some punch.
I think she's speaking more from her own perspective. She was not in the category of Nityanand Sabha boys, like the boys who are.
No, but she's also from that background, only. As in, she was just a normal student in a college, right? If I believe. When did you come to KC? School. Okay.
Yeah, but in college brushing and all also. Actually, what happened now? I used to drink Bournvita. This is a very simple example. I used to drink Bournvita. I did not know chocolate was not allowed. So one.
No, now they are still talking about it whether chocolate is allowed. Please remember, I mean that concept is also changing. Anyway, go ahead. Like Big Bang.
At that time, even 8-9 years senior devotees were treated very senior devotees.
Yeah.
He should just stop. Just throw it in the dustbin. And another counselor of my friend, she said, okay, whatever bottles you have, you finish that and then you can stop. So that was a little matured. And then I behaved in very, very fanatic ways in my house. And then people used to, when parents used to tell some good instructions, and I said, you are only my bodily father.
Yeah, we have done all that.
Yeah, so that understanding has to be given how to deal initially. That
I agree, 100%. No, that also what I've been see many times our facilitators or immediate preachers are also very new devotees only, Mataji.
Yes.
See, you cannot avoid that. The people who preached to us initially, they were not some big senior brahmachari or anything. Now they become. They were very junior. They were 2-year-old Krishna consciousness would preach very strongly, right? So we have all done stupid. I remember. I mean, I would come home initially. My father had all those paintings, right? I would ask him, which parampara are you in? You have drawn all these paintings of Krishna based on whose advice? First question. I mean, unnecessary nonsense. If I look back now, it looks so stupid to talk to your father like that. But that's the first question I asked. Which parampara has taught you to draw like this, Krishna? And though there was nothing wrong in the way he drew Krishna. Then later when I asked him to give some paintings to put in my house, he asked, why do you want? You only had told me that nothing of this is in your parampara. I said, no, it is okay, but and my brother, what happened is that when I got, one lot of paintings to my house, I was married, he was it. So my father asked him, hey Ram, you also want some? He said, I don't want anything. He gave everything to this fellow. After he got married, his wife gave him better advice. She said, even we want some. Yeah, somebody else had a comment? Or?
Regarding the sound, you said that sound is it for consciousness also? Like, we have different senses and elements. Last one is consciousness. In Krishna consciousness also, sound is one of the main senses.
No. Last is not consciousness. The gross elements mein first is sound, na Prabhuji? From sound only everything came, right? नहीं, ये वाला नहीं, ये टेबल की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं. ये टेबल important है. Sound से अर्थ आया. और sound. No, here everything is not in order. Yeah, I understood. No, this everything is not in order. This is not in order like that. This is not the order of creation. It is like this. Ulta hai. Understood? That means, see, these are all subtle senses, Prabhuji. The gross senses start with sound only, na? Gross elements, tanmatras start with sound. That means the tamogun. Yahan dekho na. Ye wala. 5 tanmatras, 5 elements. The gross reality starts with sound. So with sound you break that and get out. That's the understanding. That means the gross, what scientists perceive at least, if you see, it starts with sound only, right?
Even human body, sound is the last one. We can feel it. Like when we are, almost like when we are in the deathbed, our sight goes, smell goes, we don't take. But I think we have the power of hearing.
I don't know, old man though doesn't hear also actually. I'm not sure about that. I think old man loses all his senses. Not really sure about that. Okay, Hare Krishna. Your last question or comment? What?
Just one comment wanted.
Mic किधर है? माताजी mic. Yeah.
Just one comment. So hearing this whole analysis, and when we hear lectures of Radhanath Maharaj, actually he focuses a lot on this root.
On root, yeah, false ego. Yeah, correct.
Lectures, Maharaj says that it is that ego which transforms material energy to spiritual energy.
Correct.
That one could be going to office, but if he has proper.
Sure.
And their lectures where Maharaj said that there could be a brahmachari who is worshipping the deities, but if he's not having proper ego, that it might be material. So what is material or spiritual? It is not something external. It
Yeah.
is consciousness.
Perfect, perfect.
Very nicely it connects with this.
Yeah, even I like that part very much. Certainly, good. Okay. Any comment or what? I loved that calendar. I have that. Sure. We'll just announce. 1 second. We'll just have 5-minute kirtan. Kya hai na? Hare Krishna. Can some Mataji lead kirtan 5 minutes? Yeah, Kartal. De do.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare